What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a late-night set and decides he's had enough of the games? When someone who's spent decades mastering his craft sits down across from a host known for viral moments and playful jabs, only to flip the script entirely? This is the story of the night Denzel Washington reminded everyone exactly who he is and why some lines should never be crossed. Before we get into this, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think about what went down. Now, let's dive in. The interview started like any other. Jimmy Kimmel welcomed Denzel Washington to the stage with his usual enthusiasm, the audience erupting in applause as one of the greatest living actors took his seat. The energy was high, the crowd was pumped, and Jimmy had that look in his eye, the one that says he's got something planned, something he thinks will make for great television. "Denzel Washington, everybody," Jimmy said, grinning wide, as the applause died down. "It's always an honor to have you here. Truly. You know, I was just thinking, you've been doing this for what, 40 years now?" Denzel nodded, a slight smile on his face. "Something like that." "Something like that?" Jimmy repeated, chuckling. "I love the modesty. But seriously, 4 decades in Hollywood, 2 Oscars, countless iconic roles. You're a legend. But I gotta ask, and I think everyone wants to know this, do you ever get tired of playing the same type of character?" There was a beat of silence. The audience laughed nervously, sensing something in the question but not quite sure what. Denzel's expression didn't change much, just a subtle shift in his eyes, a slight tilt of his head. "The same type of character?" Denzel asked, his voice calm, measured. "Yeah, you know," Jimmy continued, leaning back in his chair like he was just having a casual conversation. "The tough guy, the authority figure, the man with the plan. I mean, don't get me wrong, you do it better than anyone. But have you ever wanted to, I don't know, do something completely different? Like a comedy or a rom-com?" Denzel let the question hang in the air for a moment. He looked at Jimmy, really looked at him, and when he spoke, his voice had an edge to it that wasn't there before. "Jimmy, let me ask you something," Denzel said. "When you wake up in the morning and you come to work, do you ever get tired of asking questions?" The audience laughed, but it was different now. There was tension in the room, a shift in the atmosphere that everyone could feel. Jimmy laughed too, but it was forced. "Well, I mean, that's my job, right?" "Exactly," Denzel said, nodding slowly. "That's your job. And my job is to bring characters to life, to tell stories that matter, to create something that resonates with people long after they leave the theater. So when you ask me if I get tired of playing the same type of character, what you're really asking is if I get tired of doing my job well." Jimmy's smile faltered slightly. No, that's not what I meant at all. I just meant—" "I know what you meant," Denzel interrupted, his voice still calm but firm. "You meant to get a reaction, to create a moment, to make a clip that goes viral tomorrow morning. And that's fine. That's what you do. But let me tell you something about those characters you think are all the same. Every single one of them is different. Every single one of them comes from a different place, has a different story, a different motivation. The fact that you can't see that says more about how you're watching than it does about how I'm performing." The audience was dead silent now. This wasn't playful banter anymore. This was something else entirely. Jimmy tried to recover, shifting in his seat. "I think you're taking this the wrong way, Denzel. I have nothing but respect for your work. Everyone knows you're one of the greatest actors of all time." "Do they?" Denzel asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because 2 minutes ago you just reduced 40 years of work to playing the same character over and over again." "I didn't mean it like that," Jimmy said, and for the first time, he looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I was just trying to have a conversation about range." About range?" Denzel cut him off again. "You want to talk about range? Let's talk about range. Training Day, Malcolm X, Glory, Fences, The Hurricane, Flight. You think those are the same character?" You think Malcolm X and Alonzo Harris are the same person? You think Troy Maxson and Frank Lucas are interchangeable? Jimmy opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Denzel wasn't done. See, that's the problem with this, Denzel continued, gesturing around the studio. This whole thing right here. You bring people on, you ask them surface-level questions designed to get laughs or gasps, and you don't actually engage with the work. You don't engage with what it takes to transform yourself into another person, to carry the weight of their story, to honor their truth. You just want the soundbite. Denzel, I think we've got some wires crossed here, Jimmy said, trying to inject some levity back into the situation. I'm a huge fan of yours, everyone here is. I wasn't trying to diminish your work. Then what were you trying to do? Denzel asked pointedly. Jimmy hesitated, and in that hesitation, Denzel saw everything he needed to see. He leaned back in his chair, his expression softening just slightly, but the intensity never left his eyes. Look, Jimmy, Denzel said, his voice a bit quieter now but no less powerful. I've been in this industry long enough to know how it works. I know what late-night television is. I know what you're trying to accomplish. But there's a difference between entertainment and disrespect. There's a difference between a provocative question and a dismissive one. And what you just asked me was dismissive. The audience was still silent, hanging on every word. Jimmy looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world right now. I didn't mean any disrespect, Jimmy said quietly. Maybe you didn't, Denzel replied. But impact matters more than intent. You can't just throw out a question like that and hide behind saying it was a joke when someone calls you on it. Jimmy nodded slowly, seemingly at a loss for words. The commercial break music started to play, a producer's attempt to rescue the segment. But Denzel held up a hand. We're not done yet, Denzel said, and the music stopped. Jimmy looked at his producers off camera, then back at Denzel. You could see the calculation happening in real time, trying to figure out how to navigate this situation. Denzel sat there, completely composed, completely in control. All right, Jimmy said finally. What do you want to talk about? I want to talk about why you asked that question in the first place, Denzel said. Because I don't think it was random. I don't think you just came up with it on the spot. Someone wrote it, you approved it, and you thought it would land. So tell me, what was the angle? Jimmy swallowed hard. There wasn't an angle, Denzel. I swear. It was just supposed to be a light question about your career, about whether you'd ever considered branching out into different genres. But I have branched out, Denzel said. I've done dramas, thrillers, historical pieces, action films, adaptations of August Wilson's work. I've played real people and fictional characters. I've directed. I've produced. So when you say I play the same type of character, what you're really saying is that you see a black man in a position of authority or strength, and you think that's one note. You think that's a type. The air in the studio got even heavier. Jimmy's eyes went wide. No, that's not what I was saying at all. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Denzel asked again, his voice steady. Because words matter, Jimmy. The questions you ask matter. And when you sit across from someone and reduce their life's work to a tired stereotype, you have to be ready for them to push back. I wasn't trying to stereotype you, Jimmy said, and you could hear the genuine concern in his voice now. I was trying to ask about genre, about the types of movies you choose. That's it. But you didn't ask about the types of movies I choose, Denzel countered. You asked if I get tired of playing the same character. There's a difference. One is a question about creative choices. The other is an accusation disguised as curiosity. Jimmy rubbed his face, clearly struggling. Okay, I see what you're saying. I could have worded it better. You could have thought it through better, Denzel said. This is the thing, Jimmy. You have a platform. Millions of people watch this show. And when you ask questions like that, when you frame someone's career in a certain way, that becomes part of the narrative. That becomes how people think about the work. And I've worked too hard sacrifice too much, to let that narrative be written by someone who's not paying attention. I am paying attention, Jimmy protested. I've seen all your movies. I respect everything you've done. Have you? Denzel asked. Have you really seen them? Or have you just watched them? Because there's a difference between seeing and watching. Watching is passive. Seeing requires engagement, requires you to actually absorb what's being presented to you. Jimmy didn't have an answer for that. The audience was completely transfixed, watching this masterclass in how to hold your ground without raising your voice, without losing your composure. Let me tell you a story, Denzel said, settling into his chair. Early in my career, I did a film called Cry Freedom. I played Steve Biko, a South African anti-apartheid activist who was murdered for standing up for what he believed in. That role meant something to me. It meant something to a lot of people. And when the film came out, I did the press tour, did the interviews, and you know what question I got asked over and over again? Jimmy shook his head. They asked me if I was worried about being typecast as an activist, as a revolutionary, as someone who only plays serious roles, Denzel continued. And I was young then. I answered politely. I played the game. But that question bothered me then, and it bothers me now. Because what it really was asking was, are you worried about being seen as someone who stands for something? Are you worried about being associated with dignity and strength and purpose? And my answer then and my answer now is no. I'm not worried about that at all. That's powerful, Jimmy said quietly. It is powerful, Denzel agreed. And it's also frustrating, because here we are, decades later, and I'm still getting asked variations of the same question. Still having to justify the choices I make, the characters I play, the stories I tell. And maybe that's just part of being in the public eye. Maybe that's the price of fame. But it doesn't mean I have to accept it without saying something. Jimmy nodded slowly. I hear you. I really do. And I apologize if my question came across the wrong way. It's not about apologizing, Jimmy, Denzel said. It's about understanding. It's about recognizing that every question you ask has weight behind it, has implications. You can't just throw something out there and expect people to go along with it because you're the host and they're the guest. You're right, Jimmy said. You're absolutely right. I know I'm right, Denzel said, and there was the slightest hint of a smile now. I've been doing this long enough to know when something's off, and that question was off. Jimmy laughed nervously. I feel like I should have prepared better for this interview. You should have, Denzel said simply. But here we are. The audience let out a collective breath, some nervous laughter rippling through the crowd. The tension was still there, but it had shifted slightly, become something different. Can I ask you something else? Jimmy ventured carefully. You can ask, Denzel said. Whether I answer is up to me. Fair enough, Jimmy said. Why did you decide to come on the show tonight? You don't do a lot of late-night television. You're selective about your appearances. So why here? Why now? Denzel considered the question for a moment. I came on because I have a project I believe in, because I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about the work. But I also came on because I think conversations like this need to happen. I think people need to see that you can push back, that you can challenge the premise of a question, that you don't have to just smile and nod and give the expected answer. Even if it makes things uncomfortable? Jimmy asked. Especially if it makes things uncomfortable, Denzel replied. Comfort is overrated. Growth happens in discomfort. Change happens in discomfort. And if me sitting here and calling out a bad question makes people uncomfortable, then maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. Jimmy leaned forward, his elbows on his desk. Do you think I was trying to be malicious with that question? No, Denzel said after a pause. I don't think you were trying to be malicious. I think you were trying to be clever, trying to create a moment. But clever without thought is just noise. And I don't have time for noise. That's fair, Jimmy said. It is fair, Denzel agreed. And here's the thing, Jimmy. I don't dislike you. I don't think you're a bad person. But I do think you, and a lot of people in this industry, need to do better. Need to think more critically about the narratives you're perpetuating, the assumptions you're making, the ways you're framing conversations. How do I do better? Jimmy asked. And it seemed like a genuine question. You start by listening, Denzel said. Really listening. Not just waiting for your turn to talk. Not just looking for the next joke or the next segue. You listen to what people are saying. You engage with their truth, and you respect the fact that they know their own story better than you do. Jimmy nodded, taking it all in. The audience was still captivated, still hanging on every word. This had become something far more significant than just another late-night interview. You know what I find interesting? Denzel continued, shifting in his seat. When I first started acting, people told me to be grateful for whatever roles came my way. They told me to smile, to not make waves, to just be happy I was in the room. And I did that for a while. But then I realized something. Being in the room isn't enough if you don't have a voice in the room. Presence without power is just decoration. That's a strong statement, Jimmy said. It's a true statement, Denzel replied. And it applies here. You brought me into this room, onto your stage, in front of your audience, but I'm not here to be decoration. I'm not here to play along with whatever narrative you've constructed. I'm here as a peer, as someone who has earned the right to speak their mind, and that's what I'm doing. Jimmy absorbed that, nodding slowly. I respect that. I really do. And I think this conversation, as uncomfortable as it's been, is probably more valuable than anything we would have talked about otherwise. Probably, Denzel agreed. But that doesn't mean it should have taken you asking a dismissive question for us to get here. You could have started with substance instead of trying to provoke a reaction. You're right, Jimmy said. I could have, should have. Words matter less than actions, Denzel said. Saying you should have done something is easy. Actually doing it next time is what counts. There was a moment of silence between them, and then Jimmy spoke again, his voice quieter than before. Can I ask you about your process? About how you approach a role? And I'm asking genuinely now, not trying to set anything up or create a moment. Denzel studied him for a second, then nodded. You can ask. When you take on a character, Jimmy began carefully, especially someone like Malcolm X or Reuben Carter or any of these real people you've portrayed, how do you find them? How do you become them? I don't become them, Denzel corrected. I honor them. There's a difference. When you try to become someone, you're erasing yourself. You're pretending to be something you're not. When you honor someone, you're bringing your own truth to their story. You're finding the connection between their experience and your own humanity. That's what I do. I find the truth in the character, and I let that truth guide me. And when the character is fictional? Jimmy asked. Same thing, Denzel said. Fiction is just truth dressed up in different clothes. Every character, real or imagined, is rooted in something real, some human experience or emotion or conflict. My job is to find that root and make it visible. Jimmy leaned back, genuinely engaged now. That's incredible. And that's the kind of thing I wish we'd started with, honestly. Well, we're here now, Denzel said. Better late than never. Do you ever feel like you have to prove yourself? Jimmy asked. Even after everything you've accomplished, do you still feel like you have something to prove? Every single day, Denzel said, without hesitation. Not to anyone else, but to myself. The moment you stop trying to prove something to yourself is the moment you stop growing. I want every role to challenge me, to push me somewhere I haven't been before. That's what keeps it interesting. And when you get asked if you're tired of playing the same character, Jimmy asked, a slight smile on his face, acknowledging the elephant in the room. Denzel smiled back, genuinely this time. Then I remind people that they're not paying close enough attention. The audience laughed. And this time, it was real laughter, not nervous tension. Something had shifted. The conversation had moved through the confrontation and come out the other side. "I want to say something," Jimmy began, sitting up straighter. "And I want everyone here and everyone watching to hear this. I made assumptions tonight. I asked a question that was rooted in those assumptions, and I got called out for it. And instead of getting defensive, instead of trying to laugh it off or move on, I need to acknowledge that Denzel was right to push back. He was right to challenge me. And I'm grateful for it, even though it was uncomfortable. Maybe especially because it was uncomfortable." Denzel nodded approvingly. "That's growth right there. That's what I'm talking about. This has been one of the most enlightening interviews I've ever done," Jimmy continued. "And I know it probably won't go the way these things usually go. It won't be a fun clip of us joking around or playing a game. But I think it's more important." "It is more important," Denzel agreed, "because this is real. This is two people actually talking, actually engaging with each other, actually being honest. That's rare on television." "It is rare," Jimmy said. "And maybe it shouldn't be." "Maybe it shouldn't," Denzel echoed. Jimmy looked at the camera, then back at Denzel. "Is there anything you want to say about the project you came here to talk about? Because I realize we've spent this entire time talking about everything but that." Denzel laughed, a real, genuine laugh. "You know what? The project will speak for itself. People will see it, or they won't. What matters more is this conversation we just had. This is the thing people need to hear. The project is just a movie. This is about something bigger." "It is," Jimmy agreed. "It really is. But I will say this," Denzel added. "The film is about redemption, about second chances, about recognizing when you've made a mistake and choosing to do better. So, in a way, we've lived out the theme of the movie right here tonight." Jimmy smiled. "That's perfect. Completely unplanned, but perfect." "The best things usually are," Denzel said. They sat there for a moment, just looking at each other, and there was a mutual respect there that hadn't been present at the start of the interview. Something had been built through the tension, through the confrontation, through the honesty. "Denzel Washington, everybody," Jimmy said, and this time, when the audience applauded, it felt different. It felt earned. Denzel stood, shook Jimmy's hand, and as he walked off stage, the energy in the room was electric. People weren't sure what they'd just witnessed, but they knew it was significant. They knew they'd seen something real. Jimmy watched him go, then turned to the camera. "We'll be right back," he said, but you could tell his mind was somewhere else, processing everything that had just happened. What played out on that stage was more than just a clash between a host and a guest. It was a masterclass in standing your ground, in refusing to accept narratives that diminish your work, in using your voice even when it makes people uncomfortable. Denzel Washington showed up that night not just as an actor promoting a film, but as someone who understood his worth and refused to let anyone define him on their terms. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't storm off. He didn't play into any of the expected reactions. He simply spoke his truth, challenged the premise, and demanded better. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching why he's not just a great actor, but a force to be respected. This is what happens when excellence meets disrespect. This is what happens when someone who's earned their place refuses to play the game. This is what happens when Denzel Washington decides enough is enough. If you found this story as compelling as we did, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And drop a comment below and let us know, do you think more celebrities should push back like this in interviews, or should they just play along to keep things light? Let us know what you think.